All right, welcome back to Chat with the Chief. I'm your host, Chief Rex Troche. We're in Orlando in this episode, and we are at the Police Executive Research Forum, or PERF meeting. It's an annual meeting, right? Mm-hmm. And we have the privilege of being with the PERF Executive Director, Chuck Wexler, someone who I look up to and have looked up to for many years. I have a lot of respect for a lot of things that you do in our policing community, and I know you just have a great appreciation of the history of law enforcement, but I just want to say thank you for taking the time to be here. I know this is your one of your big events. I wouldn't say the big event because I know you're like Vegas. You know, you never stop working. I know how you are, but I do appreciate you taking time before we kick this off to be with us. So I'd like to start off, if it's all right with you. Just tell us a little bit about your background, Chuck.
Well, first of all, thank you for taking the time. I have it's mutual respect for what you've done in this department, and you know you're making a difference. So your community is very fortunate to have you. Sometimes the community doesn't know how's our chief doing, and they need to know they have a really well-respected, hard-working chief who came in up through the department, came from Chicago, came here, and is now making a real contribution. And we're lucky. We're lucky to have you in the business. A lot of people leaving the business these days.
Right.
And you know what's going on. You know best practices. So I appreciate you. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I think I have one of the best jobs in the business because I get to tell other people's stories. You know, it's not about me. It's about what I find in policing, who's doing what. And policing's, you know, facing some significant challenges today, and this is really what, you know, you hope to be doing is when it's the most difficult is really pushing back hard. And as far as I'm concerned, I've been, you know, doing this at PERF for almost over 30 years. But PERF is an organization that really depends upon people like you looking at what you're doing, best practices, how you're dealing with the community, how you're dealing with crime, how you're hiring. Hiring is a huge issue in the country right now. Interestingly enough, I suspect in Sarasota, you're probably not having as many challenges as other communities. Are you?
No, we have a waiting list, and I think part of that is, you know, we're blessed, right? And as you know, there's a challenge around the country, but we have a waiting list, and I think part of the reason why we have the waiting list is because if you look at our website, it's amazing. I mean, it just captures the city, and we're really trying to appeal to this younger generation to come into our city.
See, here's what people in your community don't know. Around the country right now, police departments are challenged like they haven't. You have a department in California that's paying $70,000
Right.
signing bonus. Washington, D.C., where I'm from, $25,000. Seattle, $30,000. And you have a waiting list to come to your department. People want to come to your community. They want to be in your department. So that's the kind of organization we are. We're a research organization. We're best practices. We focus like a razor beam on use of force as we have over the years. But, you know, I'm lucky because I have a great staff. But, you know, the members that we have trust us because we're sometimes out front of issues. And sometimes that's a little dangerous because if you don't have the right membership, it's like, well, what is he doing? But we have members like you who believe in what we do. And, you know, we've been very fortunate. And so, yeah, that's PERF in a nutshell is listening to what's going on in the country, trying to understand it, and asking ourselves, how can we do better? And in this period, people are looking at crime and justice and policing, and they're asking themselves, what is my police department? How is my police department compared? And when you have a waiting list to be a police officer, you're standing out in the country. That is not the norm. We have been surveying this for the last 5 years. And since 2019, before the pandemic, before the murder of George Floyd, we already saw this. But since 2020, across the country, recruitment's been very, very difficult. Retirements and resignations have been going up. So you have this staffing challenge, like where you come from, Chicago originally, they are having a huge problem with hiring. and all across the country. Police, teachers, military, airplane. I mean, I don't know where people are getting jobs anymore, but the world is changing.
Right.
Policing is part of that.
Yeah, I think policing has has gotten a bad rap in the last few years.
Oh, yeah.
One minute we were heroes, and
Yeah.
the next minute we weren't.
Well, I mean, you can't let the few define the many.
Correct.
And that is what happens. I mean, you have, if you look at what happened in Minneapolis, you have one police officer with, that really, it was felt around the world. And I write a lot about policing, and I like to write about the working cop. I like to write about that cop that no one knows, that stops someone's trying to change a tire, someone's lost
Right.
in a mall, they can't find their car, someone is there's so much good about policing, but I'm not sure that story gets told as much as it should.
No, it doesn't. And I love your photo of the day that you do with PERF. So
Yeah.
I do appreciate that when you take a photo of just what you mentioned, a great
Right.
event occurring in the
Right.
community with kids. But I also want to go back 1 second too. Is you just talked about briefly about the incident that occurred in Minneapolis, and I think what's interesting is you were right 100%. That resonated over to Seattle, and Seattle took this turn, right? And what I find interesting now is fast forward. Seattle Police Department is one of the highest paid police departments
Yeah.
now in the state. So it's taken a 180 and it's taken a few years, but they have now turned it around. And I think it's Chief Diaz.
Yes.
And I know that he's pushing for the increased monies, the bonuses, whatever. But they really just recently did a 180.
Right. No, they're paying. The union contract is now paying, I think, over $100,000. But it's significant change. Their department in the last 5 years has lost half of their agency, and they're focusing on recruitment and hiring, and it's a challenge. It isn't all about money. That's one of the things that I've learned in this hiring. You can pay people, signing bonuses, all of those things, but people will pick what people want is this a department I want to work for? Is this community? Will it support me?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably in Sarasota. That's what they're asking, the
Correct.
people you're getting. I'm curious, the people who are coming to your department, do they tend to come from Florida or they come from outside?
Our numbers have increased immensely outside, Midwest,
Really?
Chicago, Minnesota, those agencies. Yeah, they've come in. And I think to your point, you nailed it right there. So it is not all about the money. It is about culture. It's about support. And a lot of that support starts at the state, right? Is the state going to support? Are they a law enforcement state? Which Florida is a law
Yeah.
enforcement state. Then it comes down to the community that you work in and
Yeah.
the commissioners. Where do they tend to lean? Are they supportive of the police? And I can tell you in the city of Sarasota, all 5 of our commissioners are extremely supportive of our police department, our city manager, our deputy city manager. So our officers know that they can take someone to jail as long as they follow the policies and procedures and the law. They're good to go. They're going to be supported 100%, and they know that. And we have a saying there. It's mission first, family always. So we always, when we make decisions, we base it on that. And so our people know that they are part of our family, and that for an agency my size that has 190 police officers, 250, 260 altogether with civilians, I'm fortunate I know everybody by name.
Do you really?
I know everybody by name.
You know every police officer,
By
every
name.
professional in your department by name.
By name.
That is terrific.
And I know their history, and I know about their
See,
family.
That
and
says a lot about you and the culture of the department. I mean, that's a lot of people to know.
That
Those
is.
names. You walk by them, right? You come in the morning. Good morning. How are you?
Yes.
How are you? How's your family? I heard
Yes.
your uncle died.
Yes.
What's going on? Oh, you're having another baby. All of that. Yeah.
That's important.
You cannot pay for that.
You can't put a price on how much they...
Right.
Because I remember when my chief would call me and check on me for whatever reason, if
Right.
something happened, I was like, wow, that person took the time out
Right.
of their day for me?
Right.
That's amazing. So that's what we do in our
Good for
culture
you.
there.
Good
Yeah.
for you.
Let me ask you this. How did you get this love for policing? Like, how did that start? Was there an incident that happened? Was it someone you saw?
You know, I've been asked that a lot, and I came out of the '60s, and I was very active. I was a student at Boston University, and I just always felt like whatever I did, I wanted to make a difference. And I took a course at Boston University on crime and delinquency, and I really got interested in it. So teaching makes a difference. Had I not taken that course, and then I went away and got a master's degree at Florida State in criminology, and they had an internship program where you could go back, because I'm from Boston, and work, and I chose the Boston Police Department, and then I started going to graduate school at the same time in Cambridge. And so I'm working there, I'm going to school, and it was during desegregation and of the Boston schools, and the police were responsible for escorting buses of black kids into white neighborhoods, and all sorts of conflict, throwing rocks at the buses, and we were, and I'm just an intern, and I'm filling up cars with gas, I'm buying sandwiches, whatever they want me to do, I'm doing. And I just felt like this profession, cops, right? And, here's what they're doing. They're protecting kids, and then I got involved. They saw me, and they started promoting me up and up, and then so. And also I'm heading a unit that's investigating racially motivated crime. And I'm a civilian, I'm not a cop. And I was always taken by how much good policing can make a difference in people's lives, protect lives. I mean, people were getting firebombed, getting shot, all of this stuff, and I had this unit investigating it, and we were making a difference. And I just felt like maybe in this area I can make a difference. Maybe this is something I want to do. I wasn't motivated by money or anything like that. It was just like, from college, can I make a difference? And I did that, and I think I did okay, and then I came to Washington, and I got this job, and the problem with what I do is I wish I had a job that I hated, because if I had a job that I hated, I'd be looking forward to retirement.
Right.
But when you're doing something, and I find this in a lot with chiefs like you, like when they're good at what they're doing, when they're making a difference, and they're probably workaholics, I mean, not over the top workaholics, but they're thinking about things, they're in touch with things and everything. And I think with all the criticism of policing, if you actually talk to good, hardworking police chiefs, they will tell you that even that stress is addictive in some ways, like making a difference in people's lives. And so for me, back, from my perspective, I feel like I have been the luckiest guy because I've been able to tell other people's stories. It's not about what I do. It's about finding police chiefs, finding, things, seeing something, like on use of force when I was in Scotland. I had this epiphany. This was a whole thing during Michael Brown and what was going on during that period. And use of force, and the Washington Post was doing this, and all of a sudden I looked and I said, wait a second, they don't have guns. How can they can resolve these situations? And so being in a position to see that, to do something, that's what policing is all about. That's what people don't understand. It's people, people don't want to be cops anymore. But the reality is that good cops make a difference,
right.
And when they do that, it's all what's about. So from my standpoint, I have been, one of the luckiest people because I've been able to find people like you and other people I've worked with and tell their story. That's what PERF does is to sort of, we're like talent scouts.
Right.
We're like looking for. And right now, where policing is, it's almost like one big generation of police chiefs has walked off the stage. And the stage is like, the curtain has come down, and now it's coming up again for the next generation.
No, that's 100%. And I know you, on a daily basis, communicate with pretty big time police chiefs, right? And you had said earlier, and I think you hit it on the head again, is I don't feel like I worked a day in my life. I come in here and I just love what I do. And when I'm not at work, I'm at home, I have to remind myself to be present at home because I'm thinking about how we can do things even better. Or I'm looking at an article that you've written and I'm like, okay, I to that scale, I don't know if I can make that work in my city, but can I change it up a little bit,
Right.
downscale it,
Right.
maybe throw a little paprika and
Right.
some cumin in it,
Right.
and then make it our flavor.
Right.
So
Right.
I love reading your stuff, but also too when you're talking to some of these chiefs like the Ramseys of the world and the Brattons of the world, do they ever think that they retired way too early?
I don't think that they ever thought they retired too early. They wish they were 10 or 20 years younger to do it again. That's what both of them would say.
I could see that.
Both of them would say that, there's a point where they have to do something different. But, at SMIP, the final class is like this, with me asking Chuck Ramsey questions, and I know his life. I know Chicago, I know Washington and Philadelphia, and then 20. So I know, and it's like I'm the straight man, and he's the funny guy, because I'll ask him questions and stuff, and I'll set him up and everything. And he motivates the class because he always gets to this point, where he looks at the class, and he says, you are the next generation. It is up to you to stand up, to step up. You are that, and sort of motivates them to that. But as far as he is concerned, he says, I wish I was you. I wish I was 20 years younger. So now there are some chiefs that will retire or be forced to retire before they might want to. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's because of stress, and sometimes it's honestly because of politics. Right. I mean, politics just, is brutal, especially to the good person. Like something happens, some cop does some terrible thing, and then mayors, for whatever reason, sometimes feel like, I hate this word, like you're becoming a distraction. Right. Like, what the hell does that mean? That is distraction. But no, I think no. I when those two in particular, and the way that they continue to make a difference is important. I think that we wrote a book, and I give it to every retiring chief. Mm-hmm. I say, when they tell me they were thinking of retiring, I said, read this book before you retire, because, and like Chuck Ramsey will say when I interview him, police chiefs go from 0 to 150 miles an hour. But what's it like to go from 150 back to 0? And that is a real challenge for some. For some people, retiring means, hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go play golf. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go travel. They're very happy. They never look back. For other people, they're looking at their iPhone. They're looking. I haven't been texted. Where is it? I mean, so stress becomes addictive for them. So for those people, it's really hard to make the adjustment. And Chuck says this openly, when I talked to him, that when he retired, I think it was from Washington before he went to Philadelphia, he went through depression. I mean, and it's kind of, people don't understand this about really good police chiefs, is they love what they do, even on terrible days. Mm-hmm. And there are terrible days, I always have to guard myself when I call a police chief. I'll try to listen to what's going on in their world, because usually what I have to say is so irrelevant compared to what they're talking about. Like, and in the middle, like after about 5 minutes, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I just had a police officer that took their life," or "I just had 3 people just got killed," or So they live in this very rarefied air of stress that they're constantly managing and stopping 1 minute, and they have to compartmentalize. I lost a 35-year-old officer car accident, and now I'm going to see the family, or I'm doing just this kind of world that most people don't live in, and yet they have to continue. But even that stress, in some ways, that sense of feeling a sense of importance. Like I have to, I have to deal with it. We just one of our ICAT instructors, 54 years old. He was Team 6 SEAL, and he was one of the first people we had, and excellent shape. He's in the shower. Wife doesn't see him. He's dead. He has 3 children, so, you're thinking about all that kind of, those things that police chiefs deal with all the time. And stress can be addictive.
100%. Colin Powell in his book wrote how one day he went from plugged in to unplugged. One day he went from having this special phone in his residence that was linked to the White House, and he got information real time. And the day the transition occurred for president, it was literally cut off.
Right.
And he's like, hello, this thing isn't even working anymore. So I agree with you 100%. Police officers need that. They need to start bringing it down, figuring out career 1 now is transitioning into career 2, or does it transition to a career? Are you going to go live in the Caribbean or Bermuda? But you need to have a hobby. You need to have some goals. Very hard to transition, to your point, from 150 to 0. And we see that all the time.
Well, and what I tell people who are working now and they're thinking of retiring, try some of those things that you want to do when you retire now, as opposed to then. If it's consulting, if it's teams, people say, well, I'm going to retire, I'm going to do some teaching. So, well, have you ever done any teaching? No. Have you ever done any consulting? No. And for example, both Chuck Ramsey and Bill Bratton, probably both of them have 0 hobbies.
Right.
They don't play golf. They don't do fishing. They, working for them is, and thinking about it is what they are. I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, they both would probably say, probably not the most healthy thing, but that's who they are.
Yeah, and I think for those 2 in particular, you're talking about 2 people that were the heads of major police departments, major. And so they were running and gunning 24/7, 365, and had to have thick skin, right? Because always being criticized left and right, politics played a role. And I could definitely see how that would be a challenge for them to transition. I want to ask you, while we're talking about chiefs, what are some of the character traits that you think are important in the new world chief? Like today, as you said earlier, the curtain has kind of come down on a generation, is now coming up on a new generation. What are some character traits that you look for in up-and-coming chiefs?
Well, I would say that there's a certain series of characteristics that any chief needs to have. They need to be effective managers. They need to be able to read their officers. They need to be able to develop, a team that they can work for. They need to understand their community and what motivates their community. And they always have to be looking at the horizon. They have to be looking at what does my community need? What is the political environment I'm in? And so from an effective chief has multiple audiences. They have their internal audience. They have their cops. This is what the public may not necessarily understand, is that when something happens and you have to deal with it, you have several audiences. You have your cops. Your number 1 audience is your community. Let's be honest, right? I mean, you're our chief, and so what the community wants supersedes what may be your cop. Now, people may not internally understand that, but that's the reality, is you serve the community. Within that community, you have your internal audience, and that audience is watching you carefully. Like, if I screw up and it's an honest mistake, am I going to be hung out to dry? And so you need to be attentive to, and successful chiefs need to be attentive to this balance between what is right for the community and how do I motivate my internal audience. And sometimes it's a zero-sum game where someone does something and you're like, why did they do that? Right. And because I suspect you have body-worn cameras.
Yes, sir.
Body-worn cameras have changed policing.
100%.
And we wrote the guidelines for the Justice Department on them, and then we're going to be talking about this tomorrow. Some parts of it are controversial. But now the public wants to see what actually happened. And that body-worn camera video becomes like a public record. So you, as a police chief, now are managing this information that is now available. The public wants to see it. The cops want to be protected. And what's interesting, what's happened with body-worn cameras is the good cops really want the body-worn camera.
100%.
If someone makes an allegation against them, racist, sexist, whatever, they said something, good cop says, let's go to the videotape.
Right.
And that cop is going to either be exonerated or fired. And for the good cop, it's much better than hanging over their head for the next 5 years. So back to your question about what's effective chiefs. Effective chiefs are always looking at the horizon. They're always asking themselves, where do we want to go? Where does my community want to go? They're also looking at their internal audience. They're looking at who's my next generation? Who am I bringing up? Who's doing the work? Am I being fair? We talk about procedural justice. There's procedural justice in dealing with the community. There's procedural justice with dealing with your own people, too. And what people don't always understand when they talk about police reform is complicated because in order to do police reform, you need the cops. People don't understand that. People think, we just got to fire that cop. If you do not handle some kind of disciplinary matter correctly so that your internal audience thinks it's fair and you lose them, when you're trying to change the Sarasota Police Department, who do you need to do the change? The cops. People did not reform. Some of the advocates of reform don't understand that some of the most effective police leaders are able to do reform in such a way that the internal stakeholders understand it and embrace it. You implemented body-worn cameras. I'm sure that wasn't easy.
No.
And so, what does this mean? Am I going to be? Let's face it, who wants to walk around all day with a body-worn camera? You're talking to people and everything. There's a case out there now of two cops talking to each other after a particular incident, and one says something, not good, but they're talking to
Right.
each other, and it's caught on body-worn camera, and then in the course of this investigation, that gets picked up, and that becomes this gigantic thing. So, so cops, so in your business as a police leader, you're constantly looking at how do I treat the community fairly,
Right.
but how do I do it internally so that I don't lose the cops? Because police chiefs who lose their cops now cannot accomplish police reform because the cops won't buy into it. So you have, as an effective police leader, you, chief, have this incredibly challenging job of constantly balancing what the people of Sarasota want and what the cops want. And sometimes they're not always the same. And sometimes there's a trade-off you have to make. You say, well, on this one, I'm going to lose some internal
Right.
support because this is the right thing to do. That's effective police chiefs.
I call it the double-edged sword, and I always say I'm going to get cut either way. I'm just trying to pick the duller side,
Right.
Because I'm not going to win. And I also call it the three-legged stool because we have the community, we have the officers, and then you have the political landscape that's involved. And if you pull one out, that stool's going to fall. So I feel like you're living in my head just now for the last 2 minutes because everything that you just said is something that I battle with on a daily basis. That's why when we make decisions, we try to we do a lot of thinking. We really believe that it's important to be as good to our people internally because then that will go out into the community.
Yeah. And that's really kind of inside baseball because when you talk about procedural justice, and so, this is like these terms people come up with, procedural justice, and someone said, what does that mean? It said, I think it was someone said to Chuck Ramsey a while ago, implementing community policing. Do you just want us to be nice to people? Or you want us to be fair? Yeah, okay, I get it.
Right.
I just needed to know what you're saying.
Right.
But if you want your cops to be fair to the citizens of Sarasota, then they need to be treated fairly internally. So, because if they're not, then they look at you as a hypocrite. They go like, well, he treats the community this way, but he treats us a different way. And, because that makes sense.
One of the things that I just recently changed within the last few months is any corrective action, discipline, I give directly to the officer. And so the reason for that is because, this is a giant filter, right? You got the chief, the deputy chief, you have the captains, lieutenants, the sergeant. The sergeant gives the corrective action or discipline to the officer, and it gets filtered out. And maybe the message, because that sergeant is kicking in a door, the night before with that officer, he had that life issue, right? That safety issue. So the sergeants have a very special bond with the officers, right?
Sure.
And sometimes it's hard for them to really step away from that and say, hey, I'm telling you this is for your own good. This is your corrective action. Let me tell you why, A, B, C, D. So now what I do is I set an appointment with that officer. They come to see me, and I sit down with them, and I have that conversation. I give them their corrective action or their discipline.
Thanks for listening to Chat with the Chief. I'm Cynthia McLaughlin, the Public Information Officer for the Sarasota Police Department. Did you know the majority of vehicle burglaries occur in unlocked cars? Don't give thieves the chance to take your valuables or your firearms. Be sure to protect yourself and your property by removing these things and locking your car, taking your stuff with you. Stay safe, Sarasota.
That you made a mistake, you're held accountable, we move on.
We press on.
Right. And I think that's a little bit of how body-worn cameras have changed things, because if you would have an allegation, as I said before, racism, sexism, this person talked to me in this way, in some departments, that would not be resolved for years, and a cop would have that hang. Now, I think that's the thing about discipline, holding people accountable, doing it as expeditiously as possible. Sometimes here in the state of Florida, that may be more difficult because you have a police officer's Bill of Rights, and sometimes things take longer. And I've known of some cases and some situations like take on years to resolve, and use of force cases. So, but I think that the way you do that, and the way the message you're sending is, listen, I'm the boss. You did this. Here's what we're doing. We're good. That's it. Let's go on. You got a career ahead of you, and it's not some, vague person. The
Correct.
chief. I'm getting this message from the chief, and and I think that.
And they get it from me, and I own it.
Yeah.
Right. I own that discipline.
That's probably one of the distinctions between a medium-sized department like you run and a large department is that all of the officers is a good thing. It's like there's some satisfaction there. In these larger departments, sometimes they're like large, ships,
giant ships,
hard to maneuver, and more innovation occurs actually in departments like yours, medium-sized departments, because they're large enough to have problems, but they're not too big that they can't be. You can't try something or experiment.
We
with
can
something.
pivot.
Yeah,
we can
like
pivot
that.
so fast, and it was one of those things, and I've learned that from you too. Is you can try something, and if it doesn't work out, reanalyze and then change it. Right. And so that was my thing.
Right.
Like, hey, let's try this. If it works, we'll keep doing it. If not, we'll pivot. And we pivot all the time at our department. Tell me about what we're doing here the next day or two. What is this PERF annual conference? What are some of the topics that we're discussing?
Sure. A topic that I think is going to dominate the world for the foreseeable future is artificial intelligence. And, I have enough problems with regular intelligence.
Right.
Never mind artificial intelligence. Like, what does that mean?
Right.
So I was working with some people at Harvard, and I had a meeting, brought some chiefs in, and when we talked about it. And so I'm bringing Mitch Weiss from the Harvard Business School to Orlando here for an hour tomorrow to just talk about what does artificial intelligence mean. So what I'll do is I'll let him speak for an hour. Then I'll say, and what he'll do is he'll kind of work, everybody will take out their iPhone and they'll work with it. And they'll say, okay, let's look this up. And sort of an exercise of getting everybody sort of familiar with how do you use artificial intelligence and what's like that. Then I will follow him and I'll take over and I'll say, well, what does this mean? What could this mean for your department? How could this, what are some of you using it now? I think that's a particular topic that we just, we're at this stage where we're just beginning to understand its capabilities, and some of the way the industry is usually ahead of policing in a way that I always worry about, because now there are companies that are getting market share into this, and they'll say, Chief, your officers write a lot of reports. I bet some of those reports are, not so great, right? Well, we have a package here on artificial intelligence will help your officers write their reports. So on the one hand, you're thinking, oh, that sounds good. On the other hand, I'm thinking, well, so this concept I heard from the Deputy Attorney General, we were talking about artificial intelligence. It says, human in the middle, human in the middle. So if you use artificial intelligence, you're trying to get it to do something, understand something and everything, and it provides you back with information. How do you know that the information you got back is accurate?
Right.
And it was like at this thing up at Harvard, someone said to me, asked me my age. They said, "Are you this?" And I said, "What do you mean? I'm not that age." And they said, "Well, artificial intelligence says you are."
Wrong.
So if people buy that, for example, if chiefs now buy some of the software and from these companies that are saying they're going to write their reports, what is the implications of that? But anyhow, the bad guys are using artificial intelligence. We have an election coming up, and so anyhow, police need to know what this means and how to understand it. So that'll be the beginning. Then we're going to talk about some of what's been going on in the country in terms of universities, in terms of demonstrations, and we have Chicago coming up, convention, and Milwaukee, and I can tell you, PERF wrote a report back in 2020, summer of 2020. COVID had just hit, demonstrations, George Floyd and everything, and it was like a nightmare because most of the demonstrations were peaceful, but then some percentage turned violent. And then you just saw with the universities what's going on in the Middle East. I just read, Israel just said, this war is going to continue into the next year. And so I'm just thinking that the country feels like it's very sensitive right now to the Middle East and what's going on. You have a different generation of kids. Almost a flashback to the 60s when they took over Columbia and things like that. And most campus police are not prepared for that. So, and the universities aren't helping themselves. So let the kids come on campus, let them, set up and then say, okay, we want you to get rid of it. And then the police come in and then, the chief of UCLA police lost his job. Didn't get in there fast enough, so forth. It's the balancing act. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about violent crime. We'll talk about body-worn camera issue. One of the controversial issues with video, body-worn camera videos is, should you allow the police officer to look at the video before they write their report? 10 years ago, we wrote that they should be. After big conference we had, thinking and everything, we saw the reasons why. We'll talk about that. And then we have, new chiefs coming in. We have the chief from Charlotte, had 4 officers that were killed there. We have chief from San Diego who's retiring, and just all sorts of things like that. We have a 30 by 30 initiative. People want to talk about hiring more women in policing and things like that. So, usually my job, if I'm good, is to get people to kind of talk about what's going on in their world. How are they, how do they see what they're doing? Recruitment and staffing is a huge issue. I'd love you to get up tomorrow and talk about the fact that Sarasota has a waiting list because people, would want to know, how is that possible? What are you doing?
Yeah, we're very fortunate and blessed. We have 2 lieutenant colonels retired that are also retired police officers. So those are our recruiters. And when they enter a room, it's electric.
Really?
It's electric. And then
Why?
I think you couple that, just their attitude, their persona.
Yeah.
They're humble but confident.
Right.
They have this amazing balance.
Right.
They both complement each other. One's a lieutenant colonel, retired Marine. One's Army. And they have this great relationship with each other. And they just go out, and the lieutenant colonel Marine is in his 70s and runs 4 miles a day. He walks a walk, talks a talk. So these kids see him and they have immediate respect for him, as well as the other lieutenant colonel. So I think earlier you said it's never just one thing. It never is. It's multiple things. You have to attack everything from multiple directions. Our website is amazing. We worked very hard on that. And when I look at other agencies' websites, I'm like, oh, well, let me do a little investigating on their website. It looks like they did it from a typewriter from the 60s, right? So what young applicant is going to be like, I want to go there? They're
Right.
not, because those are the things that
Right.
they're looking at. They want to look at, hey, where are you at on social media?
Right.
Where
Right.
do you sit on all these
Right.
platforms? Oh, you don't have any? Well, I don't want to be there.
And I bet, I suspect one of the things that you probably do is one of the things we looked at when we looked at this whole issue. One of the things is the process of hiring.
Mm-hmm.
If the process of hiring takes 12 months,
Too long.
you're going to lose to those departments that can do
Correct.
it in 3 months.
Correct.
And so the process itself, I mean, why we think, it takes 6 months to do a background investigation. If a detective is trying to figure out who did a homicide, they're going to do that investigation
Right.
of much faster. And so one of the things, our recommendations was to take that background investigation instead of taking a year. How do you do it? Because you're competing. Actually, what you're doing now is you're competing with each other.
Absolutely.
Right? And I don't know if you're getting cops from. I suspect cops from some of the bigger cities are leaving to come to your city.
They are. And when I talk to the recruits, when I meet them in the final meeting, they have a final meeting with me, and I actually make the offer in the Chiefs conference room. It's like, because I feel like I can get to know somebody pretty fast.
Yeah.
And then what I'll do in that meeting is I'll ask them the last question. It's like 20 minutes. I'll say, hey, who's at home that I can ask a character question to? And they're like, my wife. I'm like, let's call her up.
Really?
They're like, that's what they say. That's what they say to me. They go, really? And I go, yeah, let's call her up. So call her up, and I'm like, what's your wife's name? And then tells me Sally. Okay, hey Sally, this is Chief Troche here. Blah blah. I just want to ask a character question to your husband, and I'll ask it. And usually it's pretty spot on what we've already kind of found out. And then I let them know, well, the real reason I called you was not the character question, because I could already tell that in the 20 minutes that we spent time with this amazing person. It's we wanted you to be on the phone when we offered your husband a position
really?
with the Sarasota Police Department.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's tears on the phone, tears by the husband or the wife, right? And then we welcome them immediately into the family on the phone. Your significant other is now part of our family, and so are you. We're going to take a picture right now, and we're going to make sure we send you one right away. And then we do that process. I think it's important to make them feel like they're a number one
That's really
draft choice. And those are, to your point earlier, those are the things that we do to pivot, that we're like, hey, does this work? Let's do it. Oh, this doesn't work? Okay. We won't do it as we move forward. But those are the things that get out. And those are the things that people talk about. And that's the word of mouth. And I think that also is another angle that we use when we're recruiting, is people hear about it. They know about our podcast. They know about our website. So those are the things that are drawing in that new generation for us. So I just wanted to share that.
That's remarkable. I don't know of any department that does that.
We're always pivoting.
You're lucky when you make that phone call, you don't get one wife that goes, wait a second, that's like the last job I wanted to take.
It's been close. Recently we had parents at the beach, and they started crying. They're from New York, and they're crying. They were visiting here. We've actually found out that they've had people in the lobby, and we've brought them up to do it. I mean, we try to be really creative.
That makes it, memorable.
It
that
does.
makes it very special, because that's the part about policing that, for better or worse, it always feels like, and I don't know how many professions are like this, like it is a family, and when God forbid something happens, the policing profession supports that family. 100%. For 30 years, one of the nights I don't miss going to is that what's called the Candlelight Vigil in Washington. So this is where, officers who have died in the line of duty, their families come. So, there's about 100 of us, Attorney General and different people, we go up there, we sit on the podium, and you look out into the audience, and you'll see a family, and you'll see there's some part of that family that is missing, right? A husband or a wife or a brother or it's like there's some part of that family that is not whole. And so you're up there, and then each one of us will read the names of officers who have died. And that particular night always gets to me, because I think to myself, how many professions are like this, where, all these people come together, and then at this moment at the end, everyone lights the candle and holds it up. And it's a very kind of an emotional evening. But getting back to what you said about calling the husband or the wife and telling them, because this is a very different kind of profession. It is a calling. It is. I mean, that's why the recruiting strategies that are about money. What worries me about them is that that's where people feel they have to go. But if anyone is taking this job just because of the money, I'm not sure ultimately that's going to be a good fit.
Yeah, it's not
they have to send their kids to college. They have to live. They should live a good life. Not to take anything away, but.
And you bring up a good point too. Is I've been at 2 funerals recently for retired officers, and one officer, when you walk in, now he's been retired for 25 years, right? You see all their awards from the police department, and then you see their uniform laid out right there next to the casket. Then I go to another funeral, and another person who's separated from us 25 years ago is laying in the casket in full uniform. And so what profession, right? Is the IBM guy wearing an IBM polo shirt?
Right.
Or a Publix manager wearing the Publix polo shirt?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
That's the difference in our profession, and you hit it on the head. It's a calling. It's a way of life.
Right.
This is what we are. This is who we are. And if you're retired, you're still that person. That's still that drive is in you. So it's amazing. So I think we're at the end of this.
Yeah.
I could talk to you all day.
I could talk to you all day.
I appreciate
you said
it.
This is supposed to be 15
I know, but
minutes.
we got into this whole thing, and we're almost
No.
so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get into the speed round. Okay?
What is that?
Yeah, this is when I ask you a quick question and you say the first thing that comes to your head.
I don't like this.
I know. All right, make sure you go to our social media and listen to the rapid fire. Chuck, I just want to say thank you for coming here and spending time out of your busy day so that you could go on our podcast here and just talk about all the great things that you do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. It's an honor to be with you.
No, my honor. And as always, remember to live, love, work, and play in our city because we love it just as much as you do. Have a great day.